All right, folks, this is part 2 of the Pong tutorial. So what we are going to do now is we got the button start all working and fixed. The next thing we want to do now is we want to work on the reset button, all right? Because when I reset the button, I want the ball to, head back to the top. And then the game, I want it to stop as well. So let me go into my button reset. Let me scroll to the top, and I want to select the button click event handler. And let me drag that out on the screen. Reset this quick. All right, so we'll move this out of the way. So if you think about it, when I click the reset button, there's a lot of functionality in the reset that should be similar. Not a lot. I mean, the two main blocks of code. So rather than having to go through in here and grab all the code that I need, well, when I hit the reset button, I want the ball to go to the very top of the screen again, just like I do when I start. So I'm just going to duplicate, click on this, duplicate, and I'm going to drag and drop this into my reset over here. The other thing that I want to do is I want to use the enabled function. But the only difference now when I hit the reset button is I don't want the ball to move when I hit reset. I want it to go to the very top of the screen but stay stopped. So what I'm going to have to do is click on true, and then I'm going to have to set that Boolean to false. And that will then set the enabled function to false, which means the ball is not moving. All right, and that is basically it. So now when I test my code, which you can do right now if you want, I'll test it later when I get other functions up and running. You should be able to reset the ball, move it to the top, and have it stop. All right, so let's get a couple things up and running. So again, as you saw when I was compiling it and running it in front of the camera in the last video, you saw that the only thing that was working was the ball. The paddle wasn't working, nothing was working. So what I want to do is I want to get my paddle up and running. So remember, the paddle is my image sprite. All right, so, and if you want, you don't have to because it's the only one, but I don't want that one. I got to click on image sprite. And if I go to rename, instead of calling it image sprite, I can call it paddle. And then I could have a better understanding or a better idea that, oh, hey, that's my image sprite right there. It's my paddle. But again, if you leave it as image sprite, that's fine. So when I touch the paddle, what am I doing? Well, I'm dragging my finger, swiping my finger across the screen. All right, so I'm going to need to use my dragged event handler here. All right, and we have a couple options here: start X, start Y, previous X, previous Y, current X, and current Y. And if you think about it, whenever I have my my paddle on the bottom here, all I'm doing is I want to keep my paddle fixed in the Y. All right, I don't want it to move in the Y direction. You can if you want to make it that type of game, but I want to keep it fixed in the Y. All I want to do is I want to be able to swipe my finger back and forth, side to side, and have this paddle move in the X direction. So that's the only thing I need. And when I touch my finger on the paddle, I'm always looking to grab the current position of where my finger is on the screen so that the paddle knows exactly where to go. Otherwise, if we're using any of the others, previous or start, it's not going to work as good. And start will just keep it wherever your finger initially touched, and it will move there, and that's it. So it would be more of a touch versus a swipe and drag. So with that being said, like I did with the ball, using the move to, I'm going to do the same thing with my image sprite, my paddle here. And I'm going to scroll down. It's got the same procedures in here, and I'm going to use the move to. Because again, whenever I swipe my finger in the X and in the Y direction, I want my paddle to move to that position. So again, remember, the paddle, we always want it to move in the X. All right, so I'm going to select mouse over current X, and I'm going to grab this get current X. And then I'm going to plug that in. All right, so that will allow me to always get the current X position as my finger swipes across the screen. The Y component, on the other hand, all right, I do not want to use current Y because that will then allow me to then also move in the vertical direction. So what I want to do is I want to go under my paddle, and I want to scroll down, and there should be over here paddle.y. And so this is going to give me the exact Y coordinate of my paddle, right? This here corresponds to that number that I coded into earlier over here, the 600. So what it's doing, that get feature or that get component is grabbing this value here that we set, and it is returning that value, and that it's always going to be that value hard-coded in here. All right, it's a constant. But now what I can do is let me load up App Inventor again, so at least I can show you that piece of it, and it'll be the first test of this video. So let me scan, start it up. All right, and let's go, let's go into camera. All right, so as you can see over here, my paddle now will allow me to slide and move left and right. And obviously up and down I can't do because I set that to the hard-coded value, all right, but that's working. And again, we know the start button works, all right, but now when I hit start and then I hit reset, all right, it goes right back to the beginning, and then the ball stops moving. Start, reset, and paddle. All right, so we're getting more and more pieces hooked up. All right, so the next thing, so paddle is, for now, up and running, and it's good. What we want to do now is we want to determine when the ball reaches an edge. Okay, what do we want? Well, we want the ball to bounce off the edge. All right, that's what we want it to have happen. So being that the ball is colliding with things, all right, it's a ball that we need to worry about. And if we click on ball and we scroll up to the top to the event handlers, there's a function here that's called edge reached. And the purpose of this is that we want the ball to either bounce off the edge, which would be the walls or the ceiling, or we want it to, when reach the bottom, we want to basically stop the game. All right, and that's what we use this block for. There's a built-in variable edge, and so what that means is that as the ball is bouncing around the screen, every single time it touches an edge, whether it be the top, left, right, or bottom, it's recording that X and Y coordinate within this variable here. All right, so all we have to do to determine if the ball has touched either the walls, the ceiling, or the floor is to call this variable, and once that variable returns the value for the edge, the code will then look at where its current position is, and we'll know, well, if it hit the floor, well, then it's game over. Otherwise, to bounce. All right, and because of the fact that we're going to have to do a conditional check here, we're going to have to check to see, did the ball bounce off the floor, yes or no? If it did, then stop the game. If it did not, then bounce. All right, so that's kind of the logic we're going to use here. So I'm going to go into control. I'm going to use my if-then-else block here, and I want to plug this into my program. So from here, what we are going to do is, like I said, we got to do that conditional check. Did the ball touch the ground, the floor? All right, so for that, I'm going to have to use a mathematical operand. I'm going to have to use my equals statement. So let's go under math. Let's grab the equals, and let's plug that in here. All right, and so what I want to do is I'm going to mouse over to edge, and I'm going to click on this get edge, and I'm going to plug this in here. Because when the ball touches the floor, it's going to return that value into this variable. And that means I want to check to see, does this variable equal the constant value, the numerical value of what the floor would be in App Inventor? If it does, then I want to stop the game. If it doesn't, well, then I want the ball to bounce. And unfortunately, in App Inventor, and it's probably a product because of the fact that when you go across in the X and the Y, it's positive in either direction. So we can't put a positive number in here to detect the floor. And the reason being is because as the Y coordinate gets larger and larger, the farther we go down, there's no number that we can put into this that will allow us to detect the edge, all right, because it just gets more and more positive the farther we go down. So what App Inventor did, to make it confusing, most likely, is that they decided to use -1. By putting in the value -1, the App Inventor, the program, knows that it's the very bottom of the screen, even though it's technically positive pixel-wise, when you think of the how the X and Y coordinates work. So confusing, yes, maybe, but that's basically what they did. So when you use -1, that basically determines it's at the bottom. So when the ball bounces around the screen, when it reaches the bottom, it's going to return a value of -1 to this variable. -1 equals -1, so then we know we're at the bottom of our screen. We then need to stop the ball from moving. And just like we did with the reset button over here, we're going to control click on this enabled function, and we're going to plug this into over here. All right, so we have ball1.enabled false. So that means when the ball reaches finally the bottom of the screen, it's going to stop moving. Otherwise, if we do not reach the bottom and we hit an edge, that means we either hit the walls or we hit the ceiling. We're going to want the ball to bounce. So let's go under ball, and let's scroll down, and we have right here call ball1.bounce. So let's click on that, and we're going to plug that into our program here. And again, what do we want to do? Well, we just want to call the value get edge. All right, so the program will then know once we reach the side, all right, of the edge, well, then we want the ball to bounce. And it's going to automatically, we don't have to, I guess it's good and bad in a way. Bad because you're not understanding how to do the code of it, but good because App Inventor has done all that code for us. And so the ball is basically going to strike off the surface, and it's going to reflect off in the opposite direction at the same angle that it originally struck the surface with. All right, so this should take care of the next piece. So let me go into my App Inventor, and let me go to Connect, and let me test this component. Let's see if this is up and running. Okay, let me go to my camera. All right, so again, remember we got the paddle working. So if I hit start, the ball goes to the bottom and then bang. So before it would hit and then it would kind of just slide off. Now it's hitting the bottom and it's coming to a stop. So it knows that it's doing that. If we were to go, see now all of a sudden the ball is, before it would hit the wall and just drop straight down, now we see that the ball is actually bouncing off the wall. All right, like how it should. And when it hits the bottom, it stops. All right, so we've got the edge reached, up and running, okay? Now we need to get the ball to bounce off the paddle. All right, so that's the next piece here. So again, remember, it's the ball that's bouncing off the paddle, not the paddle bouncing off the ball. So what I want to do is there's another component in here in App Inventor called collided with. And so when the ball collides with something, what we want is we want that ball to bounce off the surface. All right, that's our train of thought of what we're going to do. So what we want to do is, so if the ball hits the paddle, we want to change the heading or change the course that it's traveling. So I'm going to go under ball 1, and I'm going to scroll down to the dark greens, and we already used this, but I'm going to click on this again, and I'm going to plug in the heading into here. All right, and so if the ball is coming in and strikes the paddle at a 80-degree angle, well, I want it to bounce off the paddle at the 80-degree angle in the opposite direction, almost like a mirror image. Or in this case, it would be considered 110, all right, 110 degrees. So what I'm going to do in order to get that, the ball to travel in that opposite direction when it strikes a surface, I'm going to do a little math over here. And I'm going to use my subtraction block. I'm going to plug that in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the value 360. Let's plug that in, and let's put 360 in here. And I'm going to subtract that by the heading that the ball is traveling in. So I'm going to go under ball. We're going to scroll to the bottom, and we're going to click on get the value of heading. So by doing this, it's going to get the current value that App Inventor sees that the ball is traveling, and then it's going to subtract 360 from it, and then it's going to then reflect in the opposite direction, in the direction that we need it to. And the reason why we do 360 first is because we're always going to have a positive value, and therefore the ball should always be have a positive angle. And therefore, it always should be bouncing in the upward direction. We should never have it bounce downward. That wouldn't make sense. All right, so we got that. And the next piece, what we want to do... Actually, you know what? That's pretty it. Because the next stuff that you're going to need to do, I want you to do as an enhancement. So let's double-check this now. So we're going to click on Connect AI Companion. And let's see if all this generically is up and running. All right, so let's go to a camera. Okay, so again, we know everything is working now. So when I now hit the start button, I can now move my paddle and to try to hopefully have the ball hit it and bounce off it. All right, and there we go. So now the ball's traveling up into in the air. What we're going to do now is, obviously, once the ball reaches the bottom, all right, it's game over. All right, so everything looks like initially it's working as according to plan. Obviously, the score feature is not working yet because that is something that I'm going to have you do. But as of right now, you know, the basic foundation of this little game is up and running, where we got the start button working, we got the reset button working, we got the ball that is moving, bouncing around the screen, stopping when we hit the bottom, bouncing off the paddle like how we want it to. All right, reset button working. So everything is basically working from a bare bones perspective as it should. All right, so, what happened here? There we go. So that is it. I'm going to stop the video there. You now have the initial foundation of, you know, what this game should be. One thing that I will, I guess a little hint I will give you is that, so you have to build some enhancements from here. And so let me do this at least. I'm going to go to variables. Let me choose initialize global. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this name, this variable name to score. And then in here, I'm going to grab a math block, a 0, and I'm going to plug that in. All right. So there is my little hint for you. You got to use variables for when it comes to the score. So now what I'm going to want you to do is a few things to enhance this program. First thing, to complete the program, I want you to fix so that the score counter is working. That the score is counting up, and also the label is presenting the proper score. So that's number one. Number two is when the ball reaches the bottom of the screen, I want you to notify the individual that they lost, game over, or something along those lines. What I also want you to do is I want you to enhance the program to make it even more challenging. So a good example would be, you know, when you reach a certain score value, all right, maybe 10 points or maybe 20 points or whatever the case may be. I want you to make the game more difficult. You can either go the route of changing the speed of the ball by cranking it up, making it faster. You can, alter the heading so that it bounces more wacky when it bounces off the paddle. You can, swap out images, so you can change the image of the paddle on the image sprite into maybe the same image, but maybe crop it down even smaller, so you shrink the size of the paddle. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can do, but I want you to at least, create some, 2 enhancements to make the game more challenging. And like I said, I'll leave it up to you how you want to do it, whether it be changing the heading, changing the speed, changing the picture so that the paddle shrinks, making it smaller, whatever the case may be. All right, and then that aside, so you have to do the notifier, get the score working, 2 enhancements to make it, more challenging. And then I'm going to get creative. I'm going to allow you to do 1 additional enhancement to your choosing, all right? But, make it somewhat challenging. Like, don't just go into the designer side and say, oh, I changed the color of my buttons, or I put a color in the background here. I don't, that's a little too basic at this point. I want you to, put some thought into it and make a pretty slick enhancement, into this program. All right, and that's it, and that'll be done. So I'll post that assignment later on tonight on Blackboard, and so you can, turn that in. Again, all I will need for this as well that you'll need to turn in is a screenshot of your code, so I can kind of look at and see what you did as far as the enhancements and the fixes to get this program completely 100% functional, how it's supposed to be. All right, that's it. So with that being said, let's stop the video here. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Take care, folks. Have an awesome weekend.